Imagine booking your dream vacation, only to find out at the last moment that your passport won't get you past immigration. In 2025, American travelers are facing unprecedented restrictions as multiple countries have imposed strict bans or severe travel warnings against U.S. citizens. Whether due to political tensions, security risks, or diplomatic conflicts, these travel bans aren't just bureaucratic hurdles. They could mean serious consequences for those who attempt to enter. In this video, we'll uncover 10 countries that have effectively barred Americans from entering in 2025. Some bans stem from hostile political relations, while others arise from internal conflicts that make foreign travelers easy targets. We'll also explore what these bans mean for the future of global travel and whether they are likely to change. Stick around till the end to discover the most dangerous country where an American passport is practically useless. Country 1. Ukraine. Ukraine remains at the center of one of the most volatile conflicts in modern history. Since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, the country has endured relentless missile strikes, drone attacks, and intense ground battles. In 2025, the war shows no signs of ending, with front lines constantly shifting and urban centers facing unpredictable bombardments. Landmines litter large portions of the countryside, and critical infrastructure, such as power plants and transportation hubs, remains under constant threat. For American travelers, this means navigating an environment where air raid sirens, curfews, and sudden escalations of violence are daily realities. Despite Ukraine's resilience and continued efforts to rebuild, travel here is not just unsafe, it's actively discouraged. Even Kyiv, once considered a relatively secure haven, faces occasional attacks, making any visit a gamble. Many Western embassies, including the U.S., have limited operations in Ukraine, meaning that in an emergency, assistance would be scarce. War crimes, unexploded ordnance, and the potential for military escalation create an environment where safety cannot be guaranteed. While Ukraine remains a symbol of resistance and strength, it is, unfortunately, not a viable destination for tourists in 2025. The U.S. Department of State has strongly advised against all travel, emphasizing that the risks far outweigh any potential reasons for visiting. Country 2. Somalia. Somalia remains one of the most dangerous and lawless countries in the world, with vast regions under the control of militant groups rather than the central government. Decades of civil war have created a landscape of instability, and in 2025, conditions have only worsened. The terrorist group Al-Shabaab continues to launch attacks against government forces, civilians, and foreign nationals, making American travelers prime targets for kidnappings, ransoms, or executions. Even in Mogadishu, the capital, bombings and armed conflicts are frequent, offering little to no security. Beyond terrorism, piracy remains a significant threat along the Somali coast, where heavily armed groups hijack vessels and take hostages. The country's severe lack of infrastructure, law enforcement, and medical services makes any emergency response nearly impossible. With no U.S. embassy or diplomatic presence to provide assistance, Somalia remains an extreme danger zone, making travel there not only highly inadvisable, but potentially life-threatening for Americans in 2025. Country 3. Russia. Once a major destination for cultural tourism, business, and diplomacy, Russia has become nearly inaccessible for American travelers in 2025. The ongoing geopolitical standoff between Moscow and Washington has led to some of the strictest travel restrictions in modern history. Following the escalation of the Ukraine conflict, the Russian government has accused the U.S. of direct interference, leading to the outright rejection of most American visa applications. The few who do gain entry, whether for work, journalism, or family visits, face extreme scrutiny from Russian authorities. with heightened surveillance, restricted movement, and mandatory reporting requirements for foreign visitors. Traveling to Russia now feels less like tourism and more like navigating a high-stakes diplomatic minefield. For those who attempt to defy these restrictions, the consequences can be severe. Wrongful detentions of American citizens have increased, with individuals being arrested on vague charges of espionage, propaganda, or anti-government activities. High-profile cases of Americans being imprisoned for extended periods, sometimes without fair trials, have become more frequent. The U.S. Embassy has openly stated that it has limited capacity to assist detained citizens, and in some cases, securing release has required diplomatic negotiations at the highest levels. With political tensions at an all-time high and legal risks growing by the day, Russia has effectively become a no-go zone for American travelers in 2025. Country 4. Iran. For decades, tensions between Iran and the United States have shaped travel risks, and in 2025, those risks have reached new heights. While it's not illegal for Americans to visit Iran, the dangers are significant, particularly due to the Iranian government's history of detaining U.S. citizens on arbitrary charges. Travelers have been accused of espionage or attempting to incite unrest, often with little or no evidence. The Iranian legal system operates with little transparency, and once arrested, foreigners can face prolonged interrogations, unfair trials, and lengthy prison sentences. Unlike in most countries, where embassy intervention can help resolve legal issues, Iran's government severely restricts U.S. diplomatic access to detained citizens, leaving them in a precarious situation. The risks are even greater for dual nationals, individuals who hold both American and Iranian citizenship. Iran does not recognize dual nationality, meaning those with Iranian heritage are treated solely as Iranian citizens under local law, often stripping them of U.S. consular protection. Many have found themselves trapped in the country, unable to leave due to sudden travel bans or politically motivated detentions. In several cases, Americans have been used as bargaining tools in diplomatic negotiations, making travel to Iran a gamble with potentially dire consequences. Given these escalating dangers, the U.S. government strongly advises against visiting Iran in 2025, no matter the reason. Country 5. North Korea. For American travelers, North Korea is one of the few places on Earth where entry is not just dangerous but outright illegal. Since 2017, the U.S. government has enforced a strict travel ban, prohibiting citizens from visiting due to the extreme risk of arbitrary detention. In 2025, tensions between Pyongyang and Washington have only escalated, with North Korea ramping up missile tests and deepening its isolation from the West. The regime's aggressive stance against foreigners, especially Americans, has made any attempt to enter the country a near-guaranteed crisis. Those who defy the ban and enter through unofficial means, such as crossing from China, face immediate arrest and long-term imprisonment under North Korea's rigid authoritarian laws. North Korea is notorious for detaining foreigners over the smallest infractions, from accidental disrespect toward their leader's image to perceived espionage. Americans who have been arrested in the past endured forced labor, brutal interrogations, and sham trials with predetermined outcomes. Unlike other hostile nations, North Korea does not negotiate diplomatic releases easily, often using detained foreigners as leverage in political standoffs. With no U.S. embassy in the country and no realistic means of rescue, North Korea remains an absolute no-go for American citizens, and this ban is unlikely to be lifted anytime soon. Country 6. Afghanistan. Since the Taliban's return to power in 2021, Afghanistan has remained one of the most perilous destinations for American travelers. In 2025, The country continues to operate under strict Islamic law, with the ruling regime maintaining a deep hostility toward Western nations, particularly the United States. Public executions, harsh crackdowns on dissent, and severe restrictions on personal freedoms make Afghanistan an unpredictable and dangerous place. For Americans, the risks go beyond cultural or legal challenges. U.S. citizens are often viewed as high-value targets by extremist groups, making them especially vulnerable to kidnappings, forced detentions, or even execution. The ongoing presence of ISIS-K and other militant factions further adds to the instability, as terrorist attacks remain a common occurrence in major cities and rural areas alike. One of the most alarming aspects of travel to Afghanistan is the complete absence of U.S. diplomatic support. With no U.S. embassy or consular services available, Americans who enter the country do so at their own risk, with little hope of assistance if something goes wrong. In recent years, multiple foreigners, including journalists, aid workers, and former military personnel, have been detained by the Taliban on vague charges, often used as political leverage in negotiations. Even humanitarian organizations struggle to operate safely in the country, with many withdrawing their teams due to security concerns. Given these extreme dangers, Afghanistan remains a country where American travelers are not only unwelcome, but at serious risk of life-threatening situations. Country 7. Syria. Syria remains one of the most unstable and dangerous countries in the world, with active conflicts still raging across multiple regions. Since the Syrian civil war began in 2011, the country has been fractured by ongoing battles between government forces, rebel groups, and terrorist organizations. Even in 2025, there is no real sense of stability, as drone strikes, suicide bombings, and military clashes continue to devastate cities and villages. The situation is further complicated by foreign military interventions, including periodic U.S. airstrikes targeting terrorist cells. This direct involvement has made American travelers especially vulnerable, as many factions, both loyal to the government and opposed to it, see U.S. citizens as symbols of Western interference. Simply put, being an American in Syria today is not just dangerous, it's life-threatening. Beyond the constant violence, Syria is one of the few countries where Americans are at equal risk from both the government and terrorist organizations. The Assad regime has a history of detaining U.S. nationals, often under accusations of espionage or subversion, leading to prolonged imprisonment with little hope of legal recourse. At the same time, extremist groups such as ISIS remnants and al-Qaeda-affiliated factions continue to target Westerners for kidnappings, ransom demands, and propaganda-driven executions. The U.S. Department of State has issued its highest-level travel warning, Level 4, Do Not Travel, emphasizing that there is no scenario in which visiting Syria is safe. With no functional American embassy, no diplomatic protections, and a constant risk of violence, Syria remains one of the most dangerous places on Earth for U.S. travelers in 2025. Country 8. Yemen. Yemen has been in the grip of a devastating civil war for over a decade, and in 2025, the crisis has only deepened. The country remains a battleground for multiple factions, including the Houthi rebels, government forces, and foreign military coalitions, all of whom are engaged in a brutal and complex conflict. Airstrikes, drone attacks, and artillery shelling are common, leaving much of the country's infrastructure in ruins. The humanitarian situation is equally dire, with widespread famine, disease outbreaks, and a collapsing healthcare system affecting millions. For American travelers, Yemen is one of the most perilous destinations in the world, not only due to the violence, but also because of the growing presence of extremist groups like al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, and ISIS affiliates, who actively target Westerners. Adding to the danger is the complete lack of U.S. diplomatic presence in Yemen. The American embassy was shut down in 2015, meaning that U.S. citizens have no official support if they find themselves in trouble. Kidnappings for ransom are frequent, with foreign nationals often held hostage for months or even years. Even seasoned humanitarian aid workers, who are accustomed to high-risk environments, struggle to operate safely within the country. With lawlessness prevailing in many regions and no foreseeable end to the conflict, Yemen remains an extreme danger zone where travel is strongly discouraged for Americans. Country 9. Venezuela. For years, Venezuela has been a politically unstable nation. But in 2025, tensions with the United States have reached a breaking point. The government of Nicolás Maduro has intensified its crackdown on foreign influence, making it nearly impossible for Americans to obtain visas. Even those who manage to enter legally face constant scrutiny, as the Venezuelan leadership has accused the U.S. of attempting to undermine its authority through sanctions and covert operations. As a result, American travelers are often viewed as potential threats rather than tourists, making any visit a risky endeavor. Political rallies, protests, and sudden crackdowns on dissent are common, creating an unpredictable environment where foreigners could easily get caught in dangerous situations. Beyond the bureaucratic roadblocks, Americans who are found in Venezuela without proper authorization, or even those who unknowingly violate local laws, face severe consequences. Reports of politically motivated arrests have surged, with many detainees denied fair trials or access to legal representation. The Venezuelan justice system, heavily controlled by the ruling government, has been known to detain foreign nationals as leverage in diplomatic disputes. For U.S. travelers, this means the risk of imprisonment without a clear path to release. With the situation continuing to deteriorate and no significant diplomatic resolution in sight, Venezuela has effectively become a no-go zone for American citizens in 2025. As global tensions rise and conflicts intensify, international travel is no longer as simple as booking a flight and packing a bag. For American travelers, the world is becoming increasingly restricted, with multiple countries either outright banning U.S. citizens or making entry nearly impossible due to political hostility, security threats, and diplomatic tensions. Whether it's the war-torn landscapes of Ukraine and Syria, the authoritarian crackdowns in Russia and Venezuela, or the lawless dangers of Somalia and Afghanistan, these destinations pose extreme risks that far outweigh any reason to visit. For those planning international trips, staying informed about travel advisories is more crucial than ever. The world is constantly changing, and a once popular destination can quickly turn into a high-risk zone. If you found this video informative, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update on global travel restrictions and safety alerts. Let us know in the comments, which of these countries surprised you the most? Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.